Hello, Garland Nixon here, and it is Christmas Day. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, that guy's got to be out of his mind. He's doing a video on Christmas Day. Well, all of those things are true, but we're going to talk about Russia and China. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and the truth is, I was running around doing a couple things this morning, and I got inspired to talk about Russia and China. I have really not much to do until for a couple of hours. I had a holiday dinner at my sister's house, so sitting there bored. Football games 13-7. Let's talk about Russia and China. How about we do that? All right. I got to start here. I got to start at the end. I got to start this story from the end, and that is how surprised I am by people in America. Oftentimes, Americans over the last few years have shocked me, on a number of occasions, and this is one of them. This whole deep state narrative stuff, the contradiction between people who consider themselves so wise, awake, and aware, right? They're red pilled. They got a color for their pill, right? I'm red pilled or whatever color pill it is. Basically arguing that I now see through the hollow narratives of the neoliberal, neoconservative, imperialist, globalist, whatever term you want to use, these fascists. Fascist works for me, but if any of the other ones seem appropriate, apply them at your leisure. So basically, because conservatives, we're not going to talk about the liberals, but conservatives, socialists, various lefties, etc., who are like, yes, man, when it comes to this deep state stuff, I see through these bastards. They'll never fool me again. Okay. And you talk about COVID. And they say, well, when it comes to COVID, I was suspicious all along, and things seemed a little weird that the way the whole disease showed up. So I had some suspicion that maybe it was from a lab. And what do you know? The government comes out and says, we think it was actually from a lab. And I didn't trust a lot of this stuff. Why? Because I'm red pilled, because I understand that you can't trust these people about anything. Okay, fair enough. The whole Ukraine comes out, and people are on the same people. They're on whatever their favorite YouTube show is, and they're they're in the chat. Yes, I knew the whole thing was a lie all the time. I always never ever believed that the deep state bastards are telling me the truth. So I looked into Ukraine. I found out about the trade union hall burning of people. I found out about the history of Crimea and all kinds of things, right? Who I can tell you who Viktor Yanukovych and Petro Poroshenko and all of these things, right? They're red pilled, man. They know what happened when it comes to Ukraine, and they know they're being lied to by the usual deep state warmongers. Okay. It's established. There's a certain group that these are the ones that surprise me that fall right into that category. And then comes China. And the same deep state non-believers who said, yeah, well, when it comes, look at history. They lied to us about Vietnam. Do you remember Iraq and weapons of mass destruction and babies out of incubators? They got their history together, and they understand, and they don't trust. And they'll even tell you about 9/11. Yeah, Building 7 was awful suspicious. I don't know. The official story doesn't make sense. They're on to everything. And then comes China, the weakest of all arguments, the weakest now. So then comes China. And here basically is how simple it is to set up China, the China narrative. China is a country that doesn't really have a history of violence, pretty much, right? China was an extremely poor country. They had something to offer, though. They had labor, and they had history, and they had unity, and and they had great culture, and they had cheap labor. They had excellent food. They had cheap labor. So what do you know? Something was going on here. And what was going on was we had had a very dark period of industrialization, wherein the billionaires did things like locked a bunch of women in a garment factory in New York. And when the garment factory caught on fire, the women couldn't get out because the owners had locked the doors so they couldn't take too many breaks. They couldn't take breaks anymore. Like 100 and some women died. And that gave birth to actually a lot of labor laws and things of that nature. But this is the kind of things that was happening, right? Unions were coming up. We got rid of child labor. We got all of these changes so that, 8-hour days, work weeks, overtime, all kinds of things like that came into account here. And well, the captains of industry didn't like that at all. That wasn't going to work for them. They were good with industrialization. They were good with great sales. They were good with great prices, but they weren't so happy in paying their labor force. If you think about a business, you got three principal what we'll call inputs, right? You've got your, let me see if I can remember them. You have labor, you have capital, and then you have, I believe it would be like what was it? You have labor, you have capital. Darn it, I forgot the three. I had Richard Wolff on. Whatever the case may be, here's my point. About this. You don't need to know the three of them to know what I'm saying. So the wealthy owners of capital created a dynamic where in this country, through their ability to control the media and their ability to control the government, where the only part of business that is important is profit. That's it. That's what we focus on. If you make the most profit, if everybody seeks the greatest profit that they can get, every corporation just seeks the greatest profit it can get, then we'll all be better off. I don't know how, but somehow, right? So in the spirit of that economic culture, the titans of industries did what that culture would require them to do. They sought to lower the cost of labor and to raise the amount to increase the profits, which in a culture where business, the entire culture is driven by high profits, it would make sense. They did the logical thing. Certainly something that would hurt the working class and the masses, but logically speaking, if your culture is we should seek the greatest profit we can, this is logical. So there's China. Hey, China. Yeah. Let me add part of this. A lot of people have argued against Nixon opening up things with China as though that he was an individual and blah, blah, blah. And he wanted to do that for any various reasons. I believe that the titans of industry as early as the 70s, what was that, 72, whatever year it was, 70, in that time period, that the titans of industry were saying then, we're paying a lot for labor and we got to give them retirements and all this kind of stuff. Let's start looking around the world for cheaper labor. And they were looking at China then. And when Nixon went over there to open up China, he went over to open up China for cheap labor. And it took them a little while, but once they got the laws they needed passed, they simply said, okay, we're in a country where you've got laws against pollution. You've got laws against exploiting your labor. You've got laws against air pollution, right? And we have to pay our labor well. We'll go to countries the countries that none of that, there were countries like Vietnam, other countries they moved to, right? Bangladesh, remember that? Probably heard of a lot of the garment factories moving there. So they moved out of a regulated environment. Part of it was the labor is expensive. The other part of it was there's environmental regulations, there's labor regulations, there's regulations. So they move out of a regulated environment to China and other countries in an unregulated environment to increase prices, but it hurt the American people. Pretty simple. And that's where we are now. That's the dynamic. That's why they did it. It made sense based on the culture that they believed in. And so now what we have is an argument that I don't understand why the so-called red-pilled people could possibly buy, where the same ruling elite are saying basically this: we made a decision to get more profits by moving all of our industry, our capacity to produce, our industrial capacity, moving it to China and other places, but especially China, because we had cheap labor in large amounts, and they were fairly well educated and everything, and they were really cheap. That's why we moved it. And it caused us to make a tremendous profit, more so than ever. And it dramatically hurt the working class people here. Those things are all true. And now they say, and China is evil and they must be stopped. China's evil and they must be stopped. And how are you going to stop them? Well, they're setting up for war with China, which would stop everybody because it's going to end in a nuclear conflict and kill us all, number one. But number two, they are doing all of these tariffs. Okay, we're going to hurt technological sanctions and all these things they're doing to hurt China. China is their own creation. They did it. They moved everything there because of a culture that says we must get as high a profits as we possibly can, and it worked. However, there were some, shall we say, unforeseen circumstances that arose as a result of their decisions. That was, the Chinese people are very resourceful, hardworking, and they unified and they came up with ways to leverage their newfound finances and access to technology. Should be expected. And what did they do? They grew. Well, you knew if you moved all your industry there that it was going to grow. But now China has to be the enemy. We have to go after China, stop China at all costs. China's bad. China's evil. China's the worst. Oh, look what they're doing to their people. Look what they're doing to the Uyghurs. Look what they're doing. Remember Peggy, somebody or other, was a tennis player. Oh, she's missing. Oh, they're doing this in the South China Sea, the Philippines, North Korea. It became the new Ukraine lie. It became the new Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. The new Putin is an evil dictator. That's what it became. It became the latest garbage, trash, lying, deep state narrative to drag us into war so that our children could all die on a foreign battlefield. And we could be impoverished, meanwhile, through their sanctions / tariffs war on China. And we can all suffer, as which we already are, with what is now inflation. But if it continues, if you go after the number one economy in the world, you're going to have stagflation, and eventually you're going to have hyperinflation. And we're supposed to suffer that because they don't like the outcome of their decision to move the industrial capacity to China, of the United States, of the entire West, to China, so that they could make more profit. And they were successful and they made more profit. And now they want to go up and demonize and beat on China. And we got a bunch of people who say that they're red-pilled or whatever the hell, and they understand the lies about everything. You go all the way back, every war, everything you can tell them, they know they were lied to. They're very, very suspicious about lab leaks now, and suspicious about everything except one thing. When it comes to China, those same brilliant minds now will go right along. Oh, Biden is the worst president ever. He's liars. Those neocons are crazy. But for some reason, when it comes to China, he hit the nail on the head there. Imagine that. And Trump and Biden disagree on everything. Biden's the worst president ever. He's lying. He's taking our rights. He's using lawfare. Everything Trump brings up against Biden, which a lot of it I would agree with. Some of it he says I wouldn't. But I think Biden is easily the worst president this country's ever had. And if you take every bad president we had and stack them on top of each other, he's 1,000,000 times worse, exponentially worse than all of them, in my humble opinion, for a number of reasons. But everything, according to the Trump people, the MAGA people, and even all the way up to Trump, that Biden's did was wrong, except one thing. He hit the nail on the head when it comes to China. Isn't that interesting? Oh, and Israel, Zionism. That tells you something, so-called red-pilled people who are so wise. Look, the things that they disagree with on I'd simply say, look at them with a jaundiced eye and try to figure out what's what and who's using an angle. But the things they agree on, that's where the deep state and the ruling elite are unified. The deep state and the ruling elite are unified on everything to do with Zionism. The deep state and the ruling elite are unified against Iran. The deep state and the ruling elite are unified against Venezuela, which you might notice one thing that's interesting, and that is that Venezuela has more oil reserves than any country in the world. But surely that has nothing to do with it. They wouldn't like it was about Venezuela like they did about everything else, right? And the deep state, more than anything, is unified. Well, not more than Zionism, the same, is unified that we have to go up against China. Now, I would argue this. I would argue that the knuckle draggers with Biden want to smash, go to war. I would argue that Trump and the techies, right? Trump and the techies, I'll call them, the Peter Deals of the world, the Musks of the world. They don't see China as something to go smash with because they got a lot of investments there. The techie people like that, libertarian techies, that's who's got the White House, like it or not, but brother, the libertarian techies who are they use libertarianism, which, you know, I have no really economic agreement, especially philosophical. I have a lot of disagreements with libertarian ideology, but I have a lot of libertarians that are good friends and great people because I respect their right to have a different ideology than me. Number one, and number two, they're generally anti-war, although some of them even buying into the China crap. I don't know why. You explain to me, nobody can explain to me really so far. I don't know, maybe people can help as to why people who, I mean, are even hip to anti-Zionism. You know, they're like, look, the Russiagate stuff was all lies. This is lies. That's lies. Oh, yeah, they won't tell the truth. What about the SS Liberty? Blah, blah, blah. Everything. Then you get to China. Well, what about China? Well, now them damn Chinese, they're really up to something. We got to all die for Taiwan and the Philippines and the South China Sea. Yes, sirree. We might all have to, the entire planet may have to be fried in a nuclear confrontation over a country with over an island with less people than the state of California. Yes, sirree. I'm willing to give up everything I've ever had. What do we need human beings on this earth for? If we can't have a country, an island that the United States State Department officially recognizes as part of China, why we might have to fight China. What is China going to come and say, hey, we were kind of looking out there at the bottom of Florida, and you got some little islands sticking out there. You call them Keys. Key West. We think Key West is no longer part of the U.S., and we're going to start shipping weapons into Key West so that they can defend themselves from the evil U.S. And we're, seeing that 7-mile bridge between the Keys, we're going to send some ships and sail in between just to show that it's international war. No, you don't see China's not doing that. The U.S. is doing all kinds of terrible stuff, but for some reason, people, it's not the deep state that I blame. Hey, they're going to do what they're going to do. I just don't understand the so-called open-eyed, knowledgeable people who are 100% down with the deep state for this one particular project, the most evil of them, right? Let's talk about China and Russia a little bit and the deep state narrative, right? So the deep state narrative is that Vladimir Putin's a dictator, an evil dictator who oppresses his people. They need to be freed from him. And of course, President Xi and the ChICOM, the Chinese Communist Party, are there. But here's what's interesting about both of them. Number one, according to U.S. polls, but prior to the last election in Russia, according to U.S. sponsored polls, Vladimir Putin had an 86% approval rating, and he got 87% of the vote. And afterwards, they said, he did terrible and nefarious things. Yeah, well, I don't know what he did, but it only netted him an additional 1% at the most from the looks of things. According to us, he went out and did terrible things, cheated in the election to go from 86% to 87%. Or you could think like me and say, isn't 1% probably within the margin of error? I'm guessing that his victory was within the margin of error. So it's kind of hard, but it didn't matter. And a guy who has an 87%, his minimal approval rate you got to give him is 87%. And that's a dictator. If that's a guy who, like, has to tell everybody in the country what to do. I'm thinking if you got an 87% approval rate, you don't really have to be real like authoritarian. 86% of the people approve of you. You can just ask them nicely, hey guys, would you, I don't know, pour me a shot of vodka? Yeah, I think he could probably find 87% of the people in the country that'd be happy to pour him a shot of vodka. So why would he need to be some authoritarian? And how is he an authoritarian? When we thought he'd get 86%. Now let's move over to China. The evil Chinese Communist Party, a government who took 800 million people over like a 20-year period out of poverty. It shouldn't be shocking why those 800 million people may support the government. I would think most likely they would. Might I add, let me add this about China. There is a parallel in that when Vladimir Putin came to power, 1999-ish, 2000-ish, their country was impoverished. They were poor. They were broke. They were humiliated. They had much of nothing. And he took over, and the U.S. was in the process, in the West, particularly the U.S. and the U.K. were basically robbing them blind. It was highway robbery. They were stealing everything that wasn't nailed down. And Vladimir Putin came in and said, hey, I don't like this. And basically, he's been there FDR on steroids. He took a Russia that was impoverished, that was broken, humiliated, and he turned it into a very powerful country. And right now, highly respected worldwide. He's a highly respected statesman outside of the West. The West thinks, oh, yes, the world hates him. Yeah, well, if the world means Europe and and the U.S. and its lackeys, then the world and even the people in there don't all hate him. But enough of them have been propagandized to hate him. But the bottom line is this: it's only logical in a country where a leader came into power and the country was broke, humiliated, and weak, and now it's strong and wealthy and respected around the world, everywhere outside of the U.S. and its lackeys. Of course, the people would like him. He's had success. You know what? I remember as a good, back then it was the Redskins. My team's the Commanders football team, and I remember when there was years ago a running back named John Riggins, and he got a $850,000 a year contract. Everybody, wow, that was a lot. They rewarded you. They showed loyalty, and Riggins said, no, they didn't. They didn't give me that money. Because they're loyal to me. They gave that money because I make touchdowns and first downs. I produce. They paid me because I produce. I mean, that was the reality, right? The people in Russia don't like Vladimir Putin because he has a nice smile or because he likes dogs or anything like that, because he's a good-looking guy. You know, the stuff they talk about in our elections. Yes, this person is tall and he looks manly, or hey, she's a woman of color, blah, 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 right? You vote for a person for these inane reasons. The truth is, the Russian people are very practical and bureaucratic. He produces. They vote for. Makes sense. China, 800 million people out of poverty. They're building stuff in China and everywhere else. They're producing. A lot of the people in the Chinese government at the top are like engineers, nuclear physicists, scientific-minded people. And they sit down and they say, we want a 5-year plan for our economy where we can raise more people into the middle. They like sit down and they do this. They don't have, let's be honest, they don't have a economy that's based on belief and culture and magic. What happens if every company just simply tries to make as much profit as they can? It'll benefit everybody down to the lowest worker. And if you say, well, really explain to me how, what's the plan? We can't really explain anything to you. We can just tell you that's just the way things work. We don't really know why. It's order by God, I guess. I don't know. And the Chinese sit down there and say, we got a plan. And as really the Russians, their economy is not fully planned, but there are a lot of parts of the Russian economy that are run by the government that work, such as, the military-industrial complex, right? Here's my point. Chinese government, my understanding is 70% of the corporate power is owned by the government, 30% is out into the market. It works for them. Apparently, it actually works very well for them. The Russians have a similar dynamic, but different. And here's the dynamic the Russians have. A lot of their natural resources, gas and oil and very, very other, and powerful commodities that they offer on the market, right? The Russian government handles it, and it's not private. And the Russian government uses that money to run the country, to upgrade things, to pay pensions, to upgrade their military, and their military industrial complex is, for the most part, it's nationalized. They handle it. So when Raytheon makes a missile for 300,000 and they mark it up to 2 million, the U.S. sells it. They make a lot of money. The Russians make a missile for $200,000. That's just what it costs. There's no, you just add administrative fees and everything together. That's the value of the missile. So they're making it without a profit. So they're able to make more considerably cheaper. That's what China does. So Russia has a money producing industries, which are mostly, from my opinion, from my understanding of it, mostly oil, gas, mining, things of that nature. I'm not sure about wheat. They produce a lot of wheat, so I would suspect the government has at least a hand in on that. So the bottom line is, but here's my point. They're able to produce for the people and not tax them to death in Russia because the government comes up with its own money, right? Produces money through, produces wealth through running company and selling the natural resources of the country. China is able to do similar types of things on a probably larger scale, much larger scale when it comes to certain, the industrial capacity, and they produce for the people, and the people are happy about that. The United States government is not respected. Really, to be honest, one could make an argument, not based on the outcome, whether Trump will be different or not, but one could make an outcome that the United States attempted a revolutionary change. And I don't mean revolutionary in the traditional perspective. I mean revolutionary rather than reform. Revolution, rather than try to reform a broken system, to try to completely change a broken system, right? And that there are a lot of people that saw they saw a system that produces nothing but war, and they were hoping for Trump would produce something different. They saw a system that in no way responded to the wants or needs of the working class, and they wanted something that would do different. This is not a discussion of whether Trump will, because in most ways, I would argue he won't. Trump is not there to change the system for you. Okay, Trump is there to save the system from you. And in doing that, if he has to do a few things that may seem anti-system, he'll do it. But he ain't there. Trump is not here. He is not the executioner, buddy. He is the surgeon. He is here to save it. He's not here to finish it off or change it. People wanted a revolutionary, right, to completely change the system, and they got a reformer. Save the system, tweak the system to save it. He believes in the system. He's rich off this system, and he believes in it. But my point is, as far as all of this together, what we end up with is a pretty obvious dynamic wherein Russia and China are stumbling blocks for U.S. hegemony. The United States wants to rule the world. Russia and China are growing. Russia and China horribly are producing for their own people. And the problem is the United States doesn't like any countries that produce the ruling elite in the US, the UK, that control all of Europe now. For now, I think that's going to change, but they do not like a good example. And I'm not saying either of those countries are perfect. I'm just saying a better example here. And you know what else is interesting is the people who buy into the deep state narrative about Russia and or China also get into this business about freedom. Well, they don't have freedom in fill in the blank Russia or the others China. So I'm supposed to believe that you're concerned with China because of the freedom that the citizens have. How about the freedom to choose their own government and be happy with it? Is that a freedom that's important? Freedom. They can't say what they want on the internet. Really? And you think you can? I'm not on Twitter right now. How'd that happen? These videos on YouTube are unbelievably censored. Man, my numbers on YouTube have dropped dramatically in the last month. When I left Sputnik, my numbers soared I was on all the time, sword numbers. And then just like that, instantly dropped. I have people constantly telling me I've been unsubscribed. I have people telling me I've been unsubscribed 5 times. I have people that tell me I never get notifications. I never see you show up anymore in any of the, right? I'm very, very widely banned on social media, or throttled back, shall we say. So anyway, the idea after Russiagate, which was a coup attempt, I'm not 100% they're going to let Trump even become president. And I'm not a Trump supporter or hater. I'm just observing the system, you know. But to argue in this fascist country that's committing a genocide right now, to argue that the Chinese people aren't free, push back against genocide in this country and see if the police don't show up at Columbia University and beat the hell out of the students. The sons and daughters of the ruling elite. This country is so wrecked, it's coming apart at the seams, that you got Luigi coming up, you know, doing the unthinkable deed to the CEO, you know, a guy whose views as representative of the policy of the ruling elite, and the people are in the streets cheering, online, cheering, hooray! If you remember the ruling elite, you know they're sharpening up the guillotines, but yet China's the problem. The countries that love their leaders, they're the problem. Russia and China, 87 and 90+% approval ratings of the government in China. Those are the problems. We, a country where the people don't trust their government, most people see their government as, you know, a real problem right now, where we look at our government in the world as saying your government is the greatest threat to peace and freedom in the world. That's the way the world looks at the US government and its lackeys. And we have the nerve to look at China or Russia and say they're bad, but their people don't think. So we're going to run a country where the people hate their government, don't trust their government, is going to go to a country that has a 90+ approval rating, 90% plus approval rating, and say, we need to step in and change the way you need to change the way you do things and do things like us. I mean, practically speaking, the people would be like, but we don't want to do things like you. We're different than you. We have a different culture than you. Oh, by the way, this is going to sound crazy to you, but what we're doing is working quite well. Yeah, that's the problem. It's working quite well for the people there. It ain't working in the Russian people, the Chinese people. Their government is delivering. Their government is answering their pleas. Here, they're giving us the freaking finger. So my point is, all of that comes back to how stupid can people be? How stupid can people be that they can see through every lie except the latest one? You know, these are the people that during previous wars, when the government said Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and we got to fight them over there, so we don't have to fight them over here, agreed. Yeah, sure, they were right. And later on, they looked back 5 years and said, you know, I think I was lied to. And now they're buying into the China stuff. And if we somehow survive 5 years, they'll look back and say, you know, isn't that crazy how they lied to us about China? And I'll be like, yeah, isn't it crazy? They lied to us about everything else, including China. Man, who would have saw that one coming? Who could have been possibly wise enough to figure out that they lied to us about every war, that they lied to us about every foreign policy confrontation, that they lied to us about every so-called enemy or dictator that we had? Who could have possibly figured out that after 99,999 lies in a row, that the next narrative would have been false too? That's my point, that I'm talking to people who buy into the anti-China crap. We got to somehow fix China. We have a right. We have a right to whatever we're doing in the Black Sea or the Baltics. And by the way, the South, what sea? China Sea. It doesn't say the Gulf of California, the Chesapeake Bay, the Hudson River. No. It's the South China Sea. And we got to go. What do you think the United States would do if suddenly China and Russia sailed on armada into the Gulf of Mexico and said, you know, we've been talking with Mexico and we're going to set up a base. And we're going to put some missiles in that base. And we're going to start building up Mexico's government because they may need to protect themselves. We're going to give billions and billions of dollars worth of weapons. We're going to buy all kinds of stuff from Mexico to be able to protect themselves from the United States. We'll do whatever we want in Mexico. Look, the people of Mexico have a right to choose who they'll ally with, and the United States has no right to tell that they're going to join the Russia, China. How do you think we buy into that? We wouldn't. We go to war. No question about it. Countries would. Countries, there's two terms. One of them is your physical boundary. The other one is your strategic boundary, right? The countries have a strategic boundary. And if you're a superpower, you need a cushion. If you're a superpower, you can't have another superpower setting up on your border pointing missiles at you. Not supposed to allow that. And the US wouldn't allow it, and neither is Russia and China. And so for some reason, we got all of these idiots who have actually parted from the mainstream media, who don't agree, but on every other thing, they don't believe the government, but this one on China's got them. This one on has got them. Now, let me say this. I had a couple other notes. What the other the other outcome that has been reaped from the U.S. anti-China move and anti-Russia and a desperate attempt to hold on to a hegemony, which they might have never even had, a domination of the world, is it has created a Russia-China alliance, which I think is a good thing, personally. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think they should have an alliance. And that could be the only thing that saves humanity for this reason. This country is run by idiots, lunatics, and fascists. I'm telling you right now, our country currently is run by a bunch of fascists. We'll see what happens after January 20th, but we'll see. The deep state, fascist, deep state, Nazi, fascist bastards, right? It's a fascist, in my opinion. America's a fascist Zionist empire. It's definitely a Zionist empire. So how you want to define the word fascist is up to you. Militaristic, authoritarian, militarily aggressive, committed to war. Those are the things to me that committed to the oppression of the rights of its own people. That's all fascism. The FBI, in my opinion, the FBI is the internal intelligence agency that, when an authoritarian government feels challenged, they have to have a way to fight back internally. That's all the FBI is, masquerading as a law enforcement agency. So we've got all that crap here. But bottom line, what we've done is we've created a dynamic where Russia and China have to huddle together to survive. One of the things that happened, part of the Ukraine project, was to set Russia up so that massive economic sanctions could be levied against it, right? And the Russian-China alliance was built as a backstop, really, first and foremost, an economic backstop, because luckily for Russia and China both, China needs everything Russia can produce for the most part. Wheat, food. Russia's huge, produces a lot of food. So food, natural resources of all kinds, energy, various types of energy. So what's going on? China needs what Russia has. Russia can sell what it has to China. Everybody's happy. And China can act as an economic backstop against the U.S. sanctions and so as they, there's another thing too that really benefits China. China does have a concern that the U.S. at some time could try to use its naval power to blockade it from natural resources, wherein Russia is close and they share a border and they can share a lot of natural resources along their own border through pipelines and stuff like that they'll have to protect. But whatever the case may be, it works for both of them very, very well. So they created it was an economically defensive alliance, and also diplomatically, both have really outstanding diplomatic corps. At the time it was Sergei Lavrov and Wang Yi, and some more names have been added, but just highly respected diplomatic corps around the world. So their alliance was, I think, mostly diplomatic, and it was economic, which for the benefit of both. I do believe now, and I'll say that's why I think their alliance can save humanity, that it is increasingly moving towards a defensive military alliance, and that they want to set up a dynamic where it's so clear and obvious that those two countries are standing back to back militarily, that the US will be deterred from attacking China, because they know that right now the neocons have their alternate plan is, if we can't take Russia out and then go after China, we'll weaken Russia so that it can help China, or weaken Russia and completely do a regime change, take it over, and then we don't have to go after China. We'll just cut off everything. Say, okay, Russia's decided that it's not going to sell you gas or oil or nickel or titanium or food or whatever, and you can do what, if you don't do what we want, so do what we want. You know, they can blackmail them, starve them, do all the terrible things, lay siege to China, economic siege to China. That's what they'd like to get Russia, take over Russia, but it ain't working. So I think Russia and China and you and me both know that the next plan is, okay, well, that didn't work. So some neocons are still going to try to hold on to the Ukraine project to the last end, but their backup plan is, okay, then if we can't have Russia, we can't have it. Let's just go drop everything everywhere, end everything, and then we'll go after China. Well, the truth of the matter is, I think Russia and China, here's what I think. Russia and China would like to get the Ukraine conflict over so they could build their alliance stronger. And it was just a very powerful economic alliance. They can continue to build their economic alliance and continue to buy time. But I do think they will continue to build up their military alliance. And I read something a while back, and Scott Ritter at the beginning of this said, look, Russia has industrial capacity, but they need a lot more. China has unthinkable industrial capacity, but what China doesn't have, let me say this, everybody looks at it like China is Russia's big brother. Well, when it comes to military and technology, Russia is everybody's big brother. Look at their technology in space. When it comes to technology, they got the legacy of the Soviet Union scientists and technologists and technological, an industrial foundation. So they got a long jump on China. And if you look at their military technology, they're Russia's leading the world. So it gets to this that Scott Ritter was getting at. If you combine Russia's industrial capacity, Russia and China's industrial capacity, but specifically Russia's military technology with China's industrial capacity, man, you have an unbeatable duo. If they say, you know what, China's going to start making Kinjal missiles, China's going to start making Oreshnik missiles, they're going to make this or that. Nobody's got Kinjal or Avant-Garde or any of these other unstoppable hypersonic missiles. Oh, China's going to start making S-400s, S-500s, that's the latest, that's whatever, right? Books, you name it all. If China starts utilizing their industrial capacity to spit out Russian technology, the U.S. might as well pack it up and go home. They wouldn't last an hour in a war. I don't think we'd last that long as it is now. I mean, for God's sake, we're getting our ass kicked by the Houthis. So, come on. Yeah, we're going to take on Russia and China. But first, we got to fight off these pesky Houthis. Can't very well. They're shooting our planes down, hitting our aircraft carriers with drones and missiles, and we want to take on China. Oh, boy. Yeah, that'll work real well. But my point, I remember I was watching a video reading about one missile factory in China, right? That I forgot what they said. The U.S. has like 8 to 12,000 missiles at that time. And they said they can produce that in about 8 to 12 days because this one missile factory makes 1,000 missiles a day. The U.S. can build about 4 Navy ships a year. China builds about 200. Now, start doing that with S-400s. Su-35s with Kinjals and Oreshnik and all on and on and on. And that Russian technology, the drones, etc. Not saying we don't have any good technology, but missile technology, we are generations behind Russia now in missile technology. Truthfully, Iran, the Houthis have hypersonic missiles. We're fighting the Houthis. Think about this now. Notwithstanding, they might have gotten it from an ally. I'm just saying they got them. We're fighting the Houthis. The Israel versus the Houthis, and the Houthis have hypersonic missiles, and the U.S. and Israel doesn't. I tell you where we are, perhaps. So what we're looking at is a circumstance where we have, by our military and diplomatic and full spectrum aggression, have driven tightly together the country with the generations ahead of us in military technology, in particular missile technology and air defense. We've united them in an alliance that, as they say, it's something that's stronger than an alliance. You've not united them, and I agree, with a country that has exponentially greater industrial power than we do. That was the move. At this point, they don't be together, and I don't see how we fight them. I also think this. If you remember, one of the things that's been said over the last several years is the U.S. has got to go to war. Look, I think the Biden administration, again, it was 2025, right? We got to go to war by 2025 or 2027. If not, China will be too powerful. Well, first of all, we got to go to China's border to fight them. They're too powerful now. They can put 1,000 missiles probably a day on every base we got in the region. I mean, they'll just unleash literally every base we have in the region. They can probably put 1,000 missiles a day on it for days and days, for months. Who knows how many they have? Probably literally millions of missiles, millions. So, you're done. You don't survive that. But they're like, we've got to fight them by 2027. Why do we want to fight? That just goes to show they don't want to fight us, but we're like, we got to fight them. Why? Because they'll be too powerful. Well, I may be wrong. I don't think Trump wants a war, particularly with China or Russia. He doesn't want nuclear war. So what that means is if Trump lives, which I ain't convinced he lives till January 20th, but if he lives and he's able to, I don't think, like I said, he'll go after the small countries. I don't think Trump wants war with China or Russia. I think that by 2028, the alliance of Russia and China will be so powerful that it'll be farcical to think about the United States, of which will be much weaker by 2028. We're getting weaker and weaker and weaker. It'll be farcical to think about the U.S. going to war with China or Russia by 2028, because let's just say we'll have bigger fish to fry at this time internally, as this thing continues to come unraveled. And I think their alliance just gets stronger. They've now said they're going to add 9 more countries to BRICS. So their alliance is going to get stronger. Their armaments are going to get more plentiful and more powerful. We've seen the Oreshnikov missile, and now we understand that Russia has some other things coming that's pretty powerful. So they're lapping us. Oreshnikov shows they're getting ahead of us. They got a missile now that, basically they got the power of a nuclear missile without having to use a nuclear weapon. With this Oreshnikov thing, it goes up, it fires 6 different warheads. Every warhead has 6 hypersonic missiles in it. So one missile has 36 hypersonic missiles, and that could do some damage. They come in, and like the missiles are coming in at, I don't know, like 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 miles an hour. They're like 3,000 or 4,000 degrees because of the heat and the plasma they create because of their speed. So even when it doesn't even have anything to blow up, it's just devastating kinetic force. Incredible to you don't really screw around with that. No. And when they start serial production, what happens if China starts serial production of them? These things are bound to happen, and as they happen, it'll be more obvious that we've lost. As Andrei Martyanov says, America lost the arms race. We've lost the whole thing, and hopefully, what the hell's going to happen? Who could predict that? We can at least start to focus internally a little bit more. We're gonna have to, because we're going to be facing hyperinflation at some point as alternative economic infrastructures grow, because the Russia-China alliance is started as an economic alliance, and it will be the backbone. It will be the foundation of the new world economic alliances that will be basically. It won't be something that's made against the U.S. It'll be another option. And in fact, they'll probably say to the U.S., if you want to trade with us, you can use our mechanisms, our alternatives to the SWIFTs. You can use our stuff. You can trade with us if you want to, but we don't need to trade with you, on your traditional economic platforms, because they were used in an aggressive manner. So I think the new economic platform will be available for anyone who wants to trade on it. That's what I think. But ours is just going to wither on the vine. So at any rate, thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day. Have a Merry Christmas or whatever the hell it is that you support. That you practice or don't practice, that you celebrate or don't celebrate, whatever the case may be. Enjoy it. Let me look and see. Are there any? Is there? Because it's Christmas, we usually get really good comments and questions on the super chat. Tabarak, shortages will lead to inflation, not factories. Interesting. Shortages will lead to inflation, not factories. All righty. I'm with you. Sheila H says, thanks a lot. Shelly H. How about we go to Dave Shaw? Thanks, Carla. I learned so much from your streams. Thank you. Let's see. Thank you very much, Dave Shaw. Just running off the mouth, having fun, hanging out with everybody. Let's look at Rockfin. Anybody? Oh, Rockfin. Dave Boteller says, happy holidays. Wow, he gave us a tip on a tip over there on Rockfin. And JVB, happy holidays. Thank you, JVB. Wow, people are in the Christmas spirit. Chris Shipley, thank you very much for being in the Christmas spirit also and donating. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. Have a wonderful day. About to go stuff myself here very shortly, as everyone is. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, all that stuff. I think that's it. Oh, also make sure you follow me. Follow me on Rockfin, ROKFIN. Follow me on Rumble. Never know. Follow me also on Facebook and Telegram. You see all my information there if you can afford it. Certainly, I know a lot of people are spending a lot of money in the holidays. So if you can't, that's fine. If you can afford a Patreon, PayPal, buy me a coffee is great. You go in there, buy Garland a coffee. How much? $5. How many coffees? Whatever. It doesn't matter. However, Christmas coffees you can afford or not afford. And then if you want, you can do just like Patreon or buy me a coffee where you become a monthly subscriber. But that's an option. Whatever. All right. But thanks a lot, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. Have a wonderful day. Peace. I'm out.